Today's project, I'm going to be replacing these gauges in my 73 Corvette with these gauges from a 74 Corvette. Oh, you think they look the same? Let's have a look at these. They aren't the same, and they're different in an important reason. That's why I'm changing them. Let's go.
You're watching On the Mark with Mark.
Things are pretty tore up on the interior of my Corvette right now because I have the tachometer and speedometer out, I've got the steering column out, and now I've taken out the gauges. And here's why. These are the new gauges that I'm going to be putting in. And these are actually out of a 74 Corvette. But let's look at what the 73 had. This is what the car came with. And the nice thing about it is they did not change the font between 73 and 74. So I can replace these and it won't look like I did. The only real telltale sign is if you look at that oil pressure gauge, it goes up to 70 psi, which is really kind of strange. And here's the 74, it goes to 80. I don't know why they did that. The engine's exactly the same. But anyway, that will be the only sign. Now, I was looking at this thing. I've had this 74 for quite a while. I bought it off of the Facebook Marketplace for 30 bucks. It's not bad. And I've tested each one of the gauges, and they all work. And I've been running the clock for the last, since 1 o'clock, and it's almost 4 o'clock now. I just disconnected it. That's what these two wires are. I just put these on so that I could put 12 volts to it and check the clock, because I've never been able to run the clock in my 73 because the whole time I had it is missing this little knob right here, so I could never set it. So I never knew if it kept time or what. I never even really looked at it. So this one, it looks like it works. Now, I was really leery about it when I was first looking at it, because if you look at how bold the type is and how white it is, and then you get to the clock, and the clock has got a finer line to it. It looks like the same font for the lettering, and the paint just isn't quite as white. So I thought, somebody has replaced this clock right here. This is not the clock that came on that 74. So when I got the 73 gauges out, you get to looking at them, and that clock looks exactly the same. So I don't know why they couldn't make them match the rest of it. It's just the way it is. So this one, I don't know if it works, and the other one I know sort of works. So I'm going to stick with it. So you're wondering, Mark, why go to so much trouble to change these gauges just to get from 70 to 80 psi? That's not it. This is the 73. With the 70, look at that right there. There was a nylon tube that's connected to this that goes through the firewall and hooks right into the engine block. And it actually has oil pushing through it. And that oil goes through that tube and comes to here. And inside of there is a tube that's kind of on an arc, and as it gets pressure in it, it turns the gauge and lets you know what your oil pressure's doing. It's a mechanical gauge. Well, what happened was I was working on the radio in my Corvette, and I had this bezel out, and I did some changing around, and I had to do some pulling and all that. And what happened was I pulled that tube out of the back of the oil pressure gauge. But I didn't know it. So after I got all my radio work done, everything was cool, and I take it out for a drive, and I'm jamming on the tunes, and everything is great. And fortunately, I didn't take a very long drive, but when I got home, I was backing into my driveway, and as I got out, I noticed my heels were coated in oil. And there was about 2 quarts of oil on the floor on the driver's side. that little tube just slowly pumped oil into my cabin and saturated the carpet, saturated my insulation underneath, and I don't know how it managed it, but the oil somehow has soaked and worked its way all the way up to the seatbelt retractor. So now every time I retract my seatbelts, it's dipped in oil. Isn't that nice? You know how many shirts I've ruined already? I keep trying to, I take towels in and cover myself up and try to keep it on it, but God, it's just so nasty. So, I really hate this thing. So as long as I'm working on the other gauges, I've just kept an eye out for these gauges for a long time. I'm not kidding you. I'll bet you, well, that happened a good 5-6 years ago, and I've been watching for these gauges at the swap meet for a long time, and I haven't seen any that have shaken out. And then the corona hit, and there's no swap meet, so okay, great, I'm really out. And then somehow, miraculously, on the Facebook Marketplace, a guy has these, and that is for $74. So it's fantastic. To start with, I'm going to remove my radio. It's on a slide mount bracket here, so very easy to get out. Now here I've got another one of these basils. You can see this. This is what goes right here. So this is what we're taking out. So this is a nice way for me to be able to show that there's two studs on the bottom of this basil that go into the center console, and then there's screws along the side, and then one screw off here to the side at the top, and then screws on the other sides. And also there's a small hole here where mine is missing, but the knob to set the time on the clock. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to show this is because look at how skinny this area is right here. This can break really easily. And what I think guys do is, I've seen this on so many C3 Corvettes, this side of the basil hangs down, and that side is about where you'd expect it to be. Now, if it all hung down this far, that would be fine, or if it was all up here this far, that would be fine. But, oh, look at that. That screw just fell out of there. I'm pretty sure that all the holes in here are pretty well egged out, and I may end up running some JB Weld up in there and drilling some new holes so that I got something good for the threads to bite into there. So I'm going to start by taking out these screws here on the sides. Yeah, I don't hardly feel like they're biting into anything. Over here. Now, in an earlier video, I took out the speedometer and tachometer in this car because I'm replacing the steering column with a tilting telescoping steering column. So that's a very cool feature that's coming to this car right here. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a bolt back here that's holding the back of the mount for the radio in. So it's much easier for me to get to this bolt than the one that's way down inside here. So I gotta get that out of there. I got that screw out down here. It's a small bolt. By the way, notice how my hands are getting oily back here. Okay, all of this is soaked in oil. Alright, next I'm going to take the nuts off of the bottom of this that are going into the leading edge of the center console. Boy, I don't know how anybody would ever find those if you didn't already know they were there. It was a 3/8 inch nut on there, and these had elastic stop nuts on them. So what happened back there, because those stop nuts didn't want to turn, I've actually screwed the studs out of this bezel on mine. So I'm holding the stud right here with the nut on it. And as I recall, the last time I had this apart, it did the same thing. So what I'll do is I'll back that nut way off, and then I'll start it again from the back side, and then once it gets bottomed out, then the nut will take up the slack here. Okay, I got one Phillips screw right here. There we go. Now she's loose. And saved the screw. Okay. Alright. Now, I've had this out before, and that's where the trouble began. Here's the issue I have with these gauges. It's just this oil pressure gauge right here. It has an actual mechanical hose that's leading to the engine. I've got a 1/4 inch socket here, and I'm going to detach these gauges from the back of this bezel here. Now that should be loose, and it is. Okay, it's coming right off of there. Look at that, a broken bulb. Funny. Probably one of my rattles. This thing, okay. That was on the clock stem. Alright, I'm going to leave all of this alone, as I don't leave it alone. Door ajar and headlamps. Alright, I'm going to move that over here just so it doesn't get lost. And this one, what does that one say? Seatbelts. That is good to know. That might get changed later. Okay, so I can set this aside now. Now this one is not going back in, but I still need to know where all of this stuff goes. It looks like some of it can only go in one place, but I'm still going to add labels to everything. Another 3/8 inch wrench. This is an open end wrench, and I'm disconnecting this oil line. Hopefully not too much oil comes out of it. Got a ferrule on it. A little bit of oil here. I'm gonna pull, well, no I'm not. I'm gonna cut that off of there. Snip that right off of there. Now that'll pull right through the firewall. Now this whole gauge cluster is free. This is the gauges out of the 73. It's got the mechanical port on it for oil pressure from the engine. This is the gauges out of a 74 Corvette, which has a mechanical oil pressure gauge in it. Boy, we just missed it by 1 year with the 73. So that's kind of tragic. Ended up with me kind of with a bunch of problems in my interior. Also, you might notice that I got this thing actually wired up right now because I'm testing the clock that came with this 74. And it looks like it works. So I was considering taking it out and putting my 73 clock in it. But that one has been missing its knob, which I finally found at a swap meet, ever since I owned it. So I was never able to set that clock. So as a consequence of that, I never really paid any attention to it or even looked at it. It might keep time, it might not. I kind of don't know. In an effort to be mindful of the 74 Corvette wiring diagram, the oil pressure gauge gets a dark blue wire that goes to the sending unit on the engine, and then a pink wire is where the power comes from. Now, there's a lot of pink wires back there. Almost every one of these has got a pink wire going to it getting the power, and I haven't traced them back anywhere, but I happen to know, in fact it's labeled right here, pink, that this terminal, this one right here, is a pink wire. So I'm just going to go off of this one here and go right down to here. So it's going to kind of jumper off in a thoughtful way. These are sure fancy. Look at that, it's gold. Yeah, that'll fit on there. Okay, so I just need a tiny wire that goes from here over to there. They didn't have pink wire there, but they did have pink wire shrink tubing. So to try to keep the wire colors the same, I'm going to cover this yellow wire with this pink. So we have a little bit of the original wiring harness color coding going on. So maybe somebody in the future, probably me, will be able to ferret things out a little bit easier. Here's my cute little pink jumper wire. I've got the shrink tubing on there. Now I'm going to shrink it down. There, shrunk down a nice tight fit. Looks like a pink wire now, just like what I need. Got it on there. Got the nut. Okay, nice and neat. Right there is that dog. Come on, focus. There we go. Right there. That's what's going to get removed. This is the tube that brought the oil into the interior. Right here is where the new electronic pressure unit will be installed. I need to take this off right now, and then I'm going to use this to pull my dark blue wire through the firewall. I have removed the air cleaner and there's a chrome shroud that covers these spark plug wires. I've taken that off too, just to give myself a little room. Okay, so now I'm going to loosen this guy up. It feels very tight. Yeah, I can get that with my fingers. Okay. So that is coming off. This is a 7/16. Oh, kind of rounding it off there. Feels like brass. Oh, you dog are not gonna do that, are you? Come on, you can come off. Boy, I don't want to come. Just slipping off. Hey, I could get a socket on there. Okay, with a couple of extensions and a knuckle. Okay, I've taken the whole shroud off of the distributor, and now I got a pretty straight shot on it here. I'm doing it left-handed here. Oh, my left arm ain't what it used to be. I've got my new dark blue wire taped on to the oil tube, and I'm going to pull it through the firewall now. That wire actually slid inside the tube a little way, so I actually got pretty good connection there. There it is. Here it is. It came with some nylon tape on the end. So I assume that's what's supposed to go on there. Hopefully we still get a good ground out of this. But here's our port that we're going to hook onto, and okay, I don't think I'm cross-threaded. I am touching the distributor though. I wonder how far in it's gonna go. That bothers me. All right. I've got to cap off that tachometer port on the distributor at some point because that's open. Okay, here's my blue wire and my connector coming off at 90 degrees. I'll pull on that a little bit from the from the cabin side. Okay, we don't want that too tight, but I did want to take up the slack. Would be nice if there was some wiring harness I could kind of tap into. We've got the back side of the bezel showing here, and last night I JB welded these two studs into the bottom of this bezel. Now here's the thing that I had forgotten about. The holes in the front of the console there are not holes, they're slots. So I can have the nuts started already, which is a big help. I don't have to try to fumble around behind there with a washer and the nut to try to get that on there. So where I'm at right now is I'm ready to set my replacement 74 set of gauges on here. That's right here. Now I have taken care, I've cleaned this lens inside and out as best I can, and while I've had this apart, I've never touched the inside of these gauges, so there should be no oily fingerprints in there, which even inside here would collect dust over time. Okay, so this is the seatbelt deal. So that says fasten seatbelt that direction, so that goes in here. Okay, then there's another little lens that goes in this side, and it says door ajar and headlamps. That's the light that says that the headlights have not come up all the way. So that's going in there. Alright, so that's why these two are sectioned off. This is all just one hole, and I don't need that piece of foam. There's a little tube, small tube, that goes on the knob for setting the clock. Alright, now I gotta hook the light bulbs up, and then I can mount it back in here. Now there's a tricky thing. This area right here, this has got to go inside of this duct that's in the dash right now. And then there's a couple of screws here and here that go into a plate at the bottom of the of that duct. So that's one of the tricky things that's got to happen here. But there's a whole bunch of things that all have to happen at once here. So let's hook up the light bulbs and also all of the gauges here. So the thing is going to get pretty tight now. Right. Hopefully I don't scratch too many things up with this damn. Okay, I've got all the gauges reconnected and the lights that are warning lights. The only thing left is all of the gray cable lights, and these are just your standard instrument lights. So it doesn't really matter where they go, just so long as they reach. So I'll plug those in next. All of the light bulbs on the gray wires are plugged in. It's quite a mess back here. Now I'm ready to put it back in. So here we go. Let's see how this goes. So this goes down in here, and I need to get into those slots. Let's see where's it. I'm just getting lined up with that slot in the center console. There we go. Boy, it's easy to see how you could break that. It's just such a tight fit. There we go. All right. Okay, now I gotta get that duct lined up. Boy, it fell right in. That was lucky. And then get this up underneath there. Oh, simple, right? Oh, wait till you try it. All right, I got a bunch of screws to put in. No, that's here. Okay, the radio to put back in. So that goes in with this bracket right here. Well,
74 gauges meet 73 Corvette. There they are in there. And unfortunately, without the steering column and the ignition, I can't start the engine, so I can't test any of these gauges. So we'll just have to wait until I get that done. But that's going to be started on probably next. The clock is working. Look at that. That's pretty nice.
I don't think working on the dash and gauges and all that stuff is anybody's favorite part of a build like this, but it's got to get done. At least sometimes you can have a nice comfortable seat to sit in the whole time. And that is if you don't drop a screw between the console and the seat, which happens sometimes and can really be a pain in the neck. But I've got these 74 gauges in right now. I really wish I could test them now and show you how they work. They probably work. I did test them, but there can always be some, loose connection or something going on back there. So we may be into it again. It's just the way it goes. That's part of the fun of the old car hobby. So I hope you learned something, saw something in here that you didn't see before. I think an important part of this for me was just labeling everything as I took the connections out for the gauges, and particularly the light bulbs that were important, like the one for the seat belt and the one for the headlight not opening, and I forget what the third one was. But anyway, so those are important that they be in the right place. All of the instrument lights, those all just had gray wires in them, so they all do the same thing and dim on the same dimmer, so not a big deal there. I didn't have to label those, and in fact, each one of the holes that they plug into, stamped into the metal, it says gray. So that makes it a little easier. I don't know if you can see it. Gray. And then over here, it says pink and green. And see, these are the important ones, but all just the regular ones are just labeled gray. So that makes that pretty easy. Looks like I've got some 73 gauges for sale here. If anybody's interested, I'll be happy to see those go. So I hope you learned something in my video. If you're looking at getting your gauges out, you probably know a little bit more what you're in for now. I'm not going to say this was fun. This took me 3 separate nights out in the garage, but probably a total of, I probably was out here for 4 hours working on this job, and that included some dilly-dallying around, and of course there's always a little more time when you're making a video out of everything. So if you thought you learned something, there was one thing in here you hadn't seen before, hit that like button for me, would you? And also, please subscribe to my channel. Now that the temperature's warmed up, I can get out in my garage, so I'm going to be hitting this thing hard now. Next, I'm going to do the tachometer and speedometer installation, and after that it's going to be the steering column and then that new steering box. So great things are coming. This thing's going to be on the road this year. Thanks for watching.